Okay.
Good afternoon. We're here in the Fairfield, Connecticut home of Dr. Richard L. Rubenstein, President Emeritus of Bridgeport University, and it's January 27th, 2013. Happens to be the birthday of my oldest child, Rafaela, so I'm in a good mood. Okay, another time. Dr. Rubenstein is known for excellence in many fields, but this particular one-on-one will be concern his works on the general field of theodicy and related metaphysics. Dr. Rubenstein is known in many circles for his book After Auschwitz, which came out in the 60s, and there's a follow-up book, second edition, which came out roughly...
I believe it was 1993.
Okay, roughly 1993. And as many of you know, rightfully or wrongfully, Dr. Rubenstein is connected with the question, is God dead? And I say rightfully or wrongfully because Dr. Rubenstein is a very sophisticated individual, highly nuanced, and it's his thinking on the subject is probably quite complex. So this is an updated one-on-one with the Dr. Richard L. Rubenstein, and I'm going to start off with the question. At this point in time, Dr. Rubenstein, what is your thinking? Is God dead?
Well, Mr. Birnbaum, it's not only at this point of time, it was right from the very start. I came to national attention at a conference on America and the Future of Theology, which was held at Emory University, I believe it was 1965. And I was asked to respond to Thomas Altizer, who was a leading Protestant death of God theologian. There are several things that I said at the time. One of the things that I said was that there's no way one can say that God is dead. One can speak of the death of God as a cultural event. And by that I meant that as far as millions of people were concerned, God had died. And that we were living in a society which was largely godless. And of course I took the Shoah, the Holocaust, as an example of people for whom God was dead. But I also said a couple of other things which resonated with the group. There were about 1,200 people at that conference. I'd say most of them were Southern Protestant pastors and professors of religion. And I said, if God is dead, I will not dance at the funeral. And the reason I said that is because Tom Altizer had written a book, the title of which was The Gospel of Christian Atheism. Well, the gospel is the good news. What he was saying is the death of God is good news. And I was saying that it is not good news, and it can only, to the extent that it's true, it can only make things bad and get worse. And that resonated with the group. They understood what I was talking about. But very clearly, I was not an atheist then, I'm not an atheist since. As I mentioned to you in our conversation, in the second edition of After Auschwitz, which I'm proud to say was published by Johns Hopkins University Press, so that there was kind of the vindication that a university press felt that what I was saying was of sufficient seriousness that they could publish it. my final chapter is called God After the Death of God. And having read some of your material, I would say that's where you and I seem to be somewhat in harmony.
Where would you see the harmony?
Well, in my chapter, God After the Death of God, I speak of two different kinds of approaches to the relationship of God and the world. One I call a system of gaps, and the other I call a system of continuities. In the system of gaps, God is radically transcendent. So to speak, he creates the world outside of himself. And the best example of this is Calvinism, where God creates the world outside of himself, that there is no connection between his decision to either save or to damn people, and therefore there's no way that people can find a connection to God. And that, I call that the system of gaps. There is a gap between God and man, and it's a radical gap. You get some of that in the Bible, but I don't think it meant that. I'm thinking of machshivotechem lo machshivotai v'dirachechem lo dirachai. For thy ways are not, thy thoughts are not my thoughts, neither are my ways your thoughts, was Isaiah. But the other is a system of continuities, where, in a sense, God is the primordial source out of which the world comes. So that in some sense, everything in the world is perhaps an epiphenomenal manifestation of the divine. But it's as if God creates the world, I have to say, out of herself.
Right.
The reason I have to say out of herself, you have the same feeling, is because these are metaphors of maternity,
Right.
not paternity.
Right. I use the term cosmic womb of potential.
Yeah, well, I also
Right.
use
Right.
womb. And the reason you and I use these terms is that it's an old tradition, and if you go down that path, the path's been trodden before us. And what we've done is we've seen that, there, in this field, it's not so easy to invent new things. If you have any respect for the great thinkers who come before us.
Right. As we both know, on some level, everything has, on some level, somewhere, somehow been said before. On another level, there is plenty of room to,
Absolutely.
for a new paradigm, tapping into an old theme, which you do in your work and I do in my work.
Right.
I must say it's this is so fascinating to me, because as a youngster, rightfully or wrongfully, you were associated with the atheistic camp, probably wrongfully.
Well, there was a great deal of hostility
Right.
to me. Yeah, let me put it to you this way. I've made this statement a number of times. I've always been struck by the fact that a number of people will always tell me and never ask me.
Right.
So I was seen as the bête noire.
Right. But hear me out. But on some level, one could say that you're saying, and frankly, I'm also saying, that the old paradigm is dead. That you need a new paradigm. Now, the new paradigm may dovetail with an ancient paradigm,
I think it does.
Right. But it probably diverges from the sort of classic mainstream paradigm.
Well, I would say that what it diverges from is the kind of insistence on a transcendent creator God who creates outside of himself and who creates individuals. And then you've got the question, well, what's the relationship between the individuals and the God? And the answer has to come down to it's a commanding relationship. In reality, you express it in what I read of your work, that we all go through a process of creation, which is an extension of the way in which divinity has gone through a process of creation. And but I have to tell you one thing. My wife used to tell me, Richard, you owe a great deal to your enemies. And I said, how do you say that? I'm talking about intellectual enemies. She says, well, they taught you how to behave calmly. And you notice, you don't find in me attacking the people who said these things. I challenge you to find it. I just went ahead and did my work.
You know, you have to be at a certain level to be worthy of being attacked. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think you have to view it that way.
Yeah, I understood where people were coming from. They thought I was dislodging something, which was very precious to them. I'm not unfamiliar with the field of the sociology of religion, and so I read, for example, Peter Berger's work, The Sacred Canopy, in which he talks about how the loss of faith can lead to anomie. And anomie is one of the most threatening experiences, the experience of meaninglessness and hopelessness. And so I can understand why people thinking I was saying one thing, although they could have asked,
Right.
that they would see me as just confirming their sense of hopelessness and anomie.
Right. That's a very, of course, that's a very could be very disturbing to people. But you didn't say that, you know.
Yeah, well,
You never said that. Right.
Yeah, I did not say that.
I might say that the classic sort of paradigm, I would respin it in my terms, is that God is there and we are here.
Yeah, I buy that.
Yeah. Whereas my paradigm, and it seems like your paradigm, is that it's one continuum. There's one continuum.
It's exactly right.
Right,
That's why I call it a system of
Right.
continuity.
And my proposition in my books, God and Evil and God and Good, is that if you propose God is there and we are here, it all breaks down. The
Right.
logic eventually breaks down. It just simply does not work.
That's right.
Whereas if you propose a continuum, then you have a fighting chance to construct a viable holistic metaphysics.
I think that's true.
Right.
Yeah.
If someone's said, say you had a 20-year-old came up to you, a 20-year-old college sophomore came up to you tomorrow, midday in school and said, Dr. Rubenstein, take a minute or take 10 minutes. Tell me your conception of God. You might say, I don't want to address your question, but let's say you did want to address the question.
Well,
What might you say?
Well, I also say it in the God after the death of God. I like a German term, das heilige Nichts. God is the holy nothingness. But I go on to say that that nothingness is not a void, but a plenum that is full of all of the potentialities. Now, why do I call it a nothingness? Because if all there is one reality, then this one reality cannot possibly be self-aware. In order that there be any kind of self-awareness, there has to be duality. One must, for example, I know myself partly because I'm sitting here and talking to you. It's the duality. It is the going from a condition of being self-enclosed, and hence without any reference to anything, to breaking out of the self-enclosure. We both have, one way or another, have spoken of our admiration of Rabbi Isaac Luria and his Kabbalism, and he speaks of the moment of creation, the Shvirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels. In a sense, God becomes God when there is otherness confronting God. Before that, God, Deus in se ipsum, God as he is in himself, to use the Latin, is a reality that is so self-enclosed that it's almost as if there's nothing there. Of course, there is everything there in potentia, and you use the word potential.
Right, that's the core of my metaphysics.
Yes, I mean, everything is there in potentia, but unless there is duality, unless something comes forth from God, you don't have it. So to me, calling God the holy nothingness, or the Urgrund, which is another German phrase, are simply ways of saying that God requires otherness in order that he can be.